We got another Latino tether in the form of a funky bean burrito smelling Mexican tether by the name of OT Mexican, who says he got a free pass to use the N word because he grew up around black people and what's anyone going to do about it, which is a bunch of nonsense. Now, of course, he said all of this while sitting on a whole platform full of nothing but non foundational black American women. There wasn't no real FBA brothers in the house and on the premises, because if there was, he would have got a whole roll of his teeth knocked out. Even if there was real FBA sisters in the house and in attendance. His cowardly behind would have got chastised quick, fast, and in a hurry. And, truth be told, there's going to start being, a heavy price to pay, a cost to pay that goes along with, non-black people who want to get out here and use that N-word, Latinos and Mexicans included, because we view them using the N-word in the same way we do as when white people use that N-word. We view it as a no-no, and we don't let white people, and we for sure as hell ain't letting y'all. You know what I mean? Because we as foundational black Americans, we couldn't take a negative term that was imposed upon, Latinos and, what their people were called, and use it amongst FBA society and use it amongst our people and say that we using it in a positive way, something that was racially used against them, and say we using it in a positive way, as a form of endearment, this, that, and the other. They wouldn't have it in the same way we shouldn't have it. And truth be told, we got to start giving pushback and resistance and boycotting these, anti, foundational black American Latino artists that's in the hip hop industry, along with any other, non-FBA that's in the, hip hop industry, because that's our cultural art form. We created hip hop as foundational black Americans. And truth be told, I see now, such as with Fat Ho, and this OT Mexican, them continually, wanting to use that N word, which is a form of disrespect. When we say, that they can't, they say that they got a free pass to say and do whatever the hell they feel, and this is a form of, them practicing anti-FBA racism, thinking that they into hip hop and using that, the hip hop thing as a secret, way to practice anti-black racism. They trying to hide behind the whole hip hop thing while being able to practice anti-FBA racism. And we ain't having that. We got to stop, co-signing and endorsing these cats, to where as though, we know the dominant white society is trying to push them upon the culture, but we as foundational black Americans, we say what's hot and what's not. If we don't give it no authenticity or validity, it's going to ultimately stop the sales, and ultimately they going to flop. Because we as foundational black Americans, we couldn't go into their cultural art forms, Puerto Rican music or Mexican music, and have a lane to come up in. They wouldn't have it in the same way we shouldn't have it. Now, I'm also hearing from this OT, Mexican tether, that he said, well, the same slave ships, brought us all over. That's a bunch of nonsense. And we in FBA society, we debunked that several times. That whole false narrative of the slave ship, that's used for tethers to try to come amongst FBA lineage and cosplay, and as a way of for them to steal from our cultural art forms and our achievements, because they ain't got no points on the board. So that's used as a way for them to try to piggyback off of our success and hardships, and it directly undermines, the black people who were already here in Americas before Christopher Columbus, because some of our people were brought over in chains. But, we formed a new ethnic group here on American soil. We had an ethnogenesis, and we went on to become foundational black Americans. So this lion fleeing tether ain't like us. We ain't like him, because we as FBAs got a different fight and resilient spirit inside of us. You know what I mean? That these other groups of people just don't possess. And, we see why that whole N word hits a little bit different with us, because many of our ancestors who were enslaved on this land, brothers and sisters, that was the last word they heard, was that N word from, and then they were strung up in a tree, and that was all that, they ever heard on this earth. So that's why we got a different pushback and resistance, to that word being used by non-black people, you know what I mean? And y'all know my stance on the family, I say that we don't use it, but, under no set of circumstances do we let non-black people, even Latinos, Mexicans, anyone, that, ain't of us, use that word, so, there got to start being a heavy price to pay. And we're going to start seeing to it that, these people who want to get out here all willy-nilly and throw around that N-word, we imposing strict penalties upon them, and they will be chastised, and, because we ain't having that, because that's a form of disrespect, saying we don't like it, and him saying, well, oh, well, do something about it. You know what I mean? That's like, who are you? You know what I mean? To think that you're going to come and, into someone else's culture and, impose yourself, you ain't built like that, homie. So we're going to start giving pushback and resistance to, these people coming in, to our culture and thinking they got a free pass to do and say whatever the hell they very well please. And it was a woman who also gave pushback and said, that nobody that's non-black should be using that word. Then this Sauce Walker cat, he said, well, she's as light as my kids, and she ain't got, that's like saying black people can't eat tacos. That's so dumb, to compare that to tacos. We got racial injustice done to us, and there's a whole history of why we don't want that N word being used. Many of our people, that was the last words they heard before being strung up in the tree. And come to find out, this Sauce Walker ain't even of the lineage. He for sure as hell ain't a foundational black American. His family comes from Honduras. And this is why the delineation movement is so important, because these people will get out here and say these foolish things, and they think that represents all black society. This is why it's important we emphasize we're foundational black Americans, because we don't think nor do we move like this. We don't let people, that's non-black use that N-word, in any way, shape, form, and fashion. And then if they choose to use it, they got to know that there will be consequences and repercussions that go along with that in the form of a good old-fashioned FBA ass whooping. So I got the audio and the video of this Mexican Tether and the nonsense he's speaking on, and we're going to walk through and talk about it how we normally do, family. Fair use.
Is really strong. I have a question. So like you're from the South. Obviously, you grew up a different kind of way, and you're a rapper too. Do you feel like you could say the N-word?
I feel like I can say it, but not because of that, and I'm gonna tell you why. I wish there was some black dudes in here.
There are. Will right there.
And this one right here is not.
Okay, well, we're gonna use him.
Okay, that's my manager. Hey,
because
Will.
me and Fee know what's up.
Well, you're black. I'm saying.
What the fuck are you gonna do about it, And then second of all, I grew up loving these motherfuckers. I grew up fighting with them. I grew up eating with them. I grew up fucking doing bad shit with them. I grew up loving with them. I got family. And it's not even about family. Even if I wasn't related to nobody,
And just because you grew up around black people don't make you, of our lineage as foundational black Americans. We can't go into your culture, and use some derogatory term that was imposed upon your people, even if we saying we using it as a form of endearment amongst our people, we using it as a positive thing. You wouldn't let us use that derogatory and negative term that was imposed upon your people and use it amongst us in black society. You wouldn't have it in the same way we ain't having this nonsense, And truth be told, if I was there on that platform, I would have knocked the roll of his front teeth out, He would have got them stupid looking glasses knocked off of his face. But let's continue.
Black. I mean, well, shit, it's what the fuck I was surrounded by, Like, I respect people that they feel that way, and that's why I try to shut the fuck up about it.
Right.
But if you're from where I'm from, or anywhere, what the fuck are you gonna do about it? It's like I don't went to the jungle and earned the lion's head. And I'll dominate anywhere. And
So
I'm not saying I'm out here just fucking whooping ass, because I've taken some ass whoopings. But you will respect me the same way I respect you.
I feel like a lot of people that are from Latino descent here in New York feel that same way. The Puerto Ricans, the Dominican, like Stephanie, for instance, our former co-host.
Yeah.
Like, she's 100% Puerto Rican, but will...
And that's something that we in FBA society, we cleaning up right now. It's going on far too long where these Latinos think that they got a free pass to use that N-word, which was derogatory towards our ancestors, imposed upon our ancestors. And some of our ancestors, that was the last word they heard before being strung up in the tree. So we going back and cleaning up that whole false narrative of, Latinos being able to use that N-word. If Latinos want to get out here all willy-nilly and throw around that N-word, there's going to be hell to pay, in the form of a good old-fashioned FBA ass whooping.
Right.
And nobody says anything about it. So what's the difference?
I mean, shit, y'all just, and not even trying to justify, but shit, y'all just got dropped off before us. That's all it is.
That's a false narrative, family. Whenever you hear that lion slave ship narrative, that's a way for people to come into our culture, be able to come in and steal and piggyback off of our hard work, achievements, and success.
Y'all got dropped off first. It's crazy.
We from the same boat.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I hear your point, but I also feel like you
that lion slave ship narrative, that downplayed the role of there was we already had black people on this land in America. You know what I mean? And we had an ethnogenesis. were not, and the slaves who were brought over along with those black people already here, we became foundational black Americans, truth be told.
You know when someone else will feel like it's disrespect. Mm-hmm. So it's not even so much like what you gonna do about it. It's like some people really find it disrespectful.
But I remember I remember being disrespectful like where I'm from.
Yeah, family, but my stance on it. I say that we don't even use the word amongst us. We find more higher vibrational words, to call, even, other black people, amongst our society. We start calling ourselves kings, queens, gods, because all of that we are, you know what I mean? But under no set of circumstances do we let non-black people such as Latinos, Mexicans, white people use this word. And if people want to get out here all willy-nilly and use that N word, there's going to be consequences and repercussions that go along with that. There's going to be hell to pay. You know what I mean? Because there's a paradigm shift going on now as far as, in FBA society amongst our lineage. We're taking our proper seat back at the top. And, anything that's in our line and path of, getting our proper just due, our leg up, it's going to be looked at as a barrier, and it's going to be, perceived as a threat that's going to be neutralized in any way, shape, form, and fashion. We deem, just my thoughts on the matter. But this, Mexican Tether, he was out of bounds and out of order, and if I was on that platform, he would have got cleaned up. Peace.